share out my screen here. Perfect. So thanks, everyone. Welcome. So today we're going to talk about next generation CASB from Palo Alto Networks. So for those who don't know, Palo Alto Networks does have a CASB solution, or Cloud Access Security Broker solution. And we have delivered this next generation CASB solution to the market relatively recently. So we're going to give a high level overview in this session. And then in the next session, one of our product managers, Raj, is going to talk a little bit more in depth about how we do some of the things that we do in SaaS security inline, which is one of the modules. So I'll give a high level overview now, and then Raj will come in the next session and talk a little bit more in depth. So from an agenda perspective for my session, talk a little bit about some of the SaaS security challenges that organizations who come to Palo Alto Networks are facing, give you a brief solution overview, talk about our technical capabilities in the architecture, and why some organizations choose to do business with Palo Alto Networks from a SaaS security perspective. So the world is changing. Hybrid work is the new normal. I was just talking to somebody about how many days a week are they going in the office. The idea of working from home all the time was a normal a year or two ago, but now hybrid work is the new normal. So the way that we need to secure applications has evolved rapidly over the last couple of years. In addition to that, SaaS applications have exploded. There's been massive growth in the number of SaaS applications that are required in order to enable business. The need to put data into those SaaS applications is a key driver for businesses. The SaaS applications we're talking about are everything from your critical business applications like Google Workspace or Microsoft Office to maybe more niche applications like healthcare applications for healthcare organizations, or maybe something like a productivity application like a Slack, or maybe that's a collaboration application. There's a lot of different applications out there, and that rise of applications is exploding. And then thirdly, the rise of collaboration applications. So people are communicating in different ways. People are contacting each other and sharing information and data in different ways. From Zoom messages to Slack messages, that growth is exploding. And the sensitivity of the information across those collaboration applications is certainly becoming more strategic to the driver of the business. So that changing world is making security-minded individuals rethink how they control access to SaaS applications and how they evaluate the data that is inside of or transmitted over those SaaS applications. Furthermore, SaaS applications are accessed from any location by any device. You look at a typical organization, they have some sanctioned SaaS applications like Office 365 or Slack or Salesforce. They have a huge volume of applications that they're forced to tolerate. We call those tolerated applications. Things like maybe LinkedIn is a good example of a tolerated application. You probably don't block your employees from accessing LinkedIn, but you don't necessarily want them to put secret information that is vital to your business that would hurt the business if it got out on their LinkedIn profile. And then there's risky applications that you probably don't want individuals getting to at all. I ran a SaaS risk report for an organization, and they found that they had a huge volume of users accessing a Russian email service. Probably a risky application that you don't want users accessing at all from any device. To add to that complexity, you have users from different locations traversing different networks. Some are going direct to the internet from their home. Some are going from branch or remote offices. Some are going still from a headquarters or a location like a data center. So those users are accessing those applications from any device, from any location. So this leads to the questions that organizations have about their use of SaaS applications. What apps are employees using and how are they using those applications? Are they using them for business purposes? Are they necessary for the business? Or are they just using those applications on work computers because they're at work all day? And then the data, how do you protect that sensitive data inside of those cloud applications? And then thirdly, how do you govern access to SaaS applications, specifically to prevent users from becoming a risk vector, becoming a threat vector? Compromised user accounts can be a challenge. Users accessing applications and putting data in there that they shouldn't can be a challenge. So these are the kinds of questions that CASB can help answer for organizations. Using CASB, you can discover and control all of the applications that are in use in your environment. So that's one of the key use cases that CASB was developed for. Cloud Application Security Broker. The idea is to broker those connections to the outside world, discover and identify all SaaS applications in use and control user access. So we'll talk about how Palo Alto does that differently than others in the market and why we think we're better at it. And then discover and secure sensitive data. Once you've discovered and controlled application access, it becomes critically important to not only discover the access to the application itself, but what kind of sensitive data is stored and transferred across those SaaS applications. You know, it might be okay for somebody to put data inside a Salesforce or inside a box because that's a known application that your business uses. You might want different kinds of data in Salesforce than you do in Box. It might be perfectly okay to put customer data in Salesforce because of the security controls that you have around Salesforce. But you might not want that same list of customers sitting inside a box. And then the third use case that we see a lot, and the third question that CASB helps organizations answer for themselves is, how do I protect against threats? You know, weaponized Office documents, malware. These things inside of cloud applications become a little bit more challenging to detect than they do on an endpoint that you own. Inside of a cloud application, detection of malware is pretty critical still. You're still responsible for that data as an organization. You're still responsible for that user as an organization. So detecting and stopping malware and other threats is a very important use case that CASB helps with. So in this modern distributed world, first generation CASB often falls a little bit short. There's limited application visibility and control where you can't see net new applications. There's a lack of APIs or API application programming interfaces for collaboration apps. There's sometimes inaccurate or limited coverage for data protection. So understanding that there might be false positives in the data patterns or profiles to identify certain kinds of data that can inundate a security analyst with false positives. And then poor security, understanding that those connections that are made might not be the most secure. They might be incomplete or inconsistent security profiles. How does Palo Alto Networks do things differently? Well, we have a track record of delivering cloud-delivered security services. So for the last several years, we have delivered innovative security services as part of our next generation platform. So we have a history at Palo Alto Networks of identifying the ability to deliver from the cloud security services. You may be familiar with Wildfire, which is our next generation threat detection service, machine learning based threat detection service. You may be familiar with our DNS security or our IoT security. Well, adding SaaS security to this list of cloud delivered security services is just the next in a long line of cloud delivered security services that we have at Palo Alto Networks. So we have this track record of being able to do this well. In addition, we have the ability to scale because we have multiple controls in which we can deliver CASB. You see down at the bottom, we have Prisma Access, which is our firewall as a service for remote users. So if you have a user who's going direct to net, we can supply next generation CASB as a security service for that user. If you have next generation firewall for HQ and for data center, we have the ability to deliver next generation CASB as a security service for that firewall user. And then of course, for branch offices or for remote use cases where a virtual firewall makes more sense, we have the ability to deliver next generation CASB for that as well. So this idea of having a hybrid environment where some remote users might roll through Prisma Access, some on-premises users might roll through a next generation firewall. We support a very flexible architecture to keep up with that hybrid workforce. So there's a few components of our next generation CASB solution. I mentioned that in the next session, Raj from our product management team is going to dig very deep into our SaaS security inline and talk about some of the inline visibility and control components. So that is one of the modules. The other module is our SaaS security API component. So if you think of inline and API, those are looking at controlling traffic inline, understanding who has access to what cloud applications, what are they going to. API is looking at sanctioned cloud applications, making a connection to those cloud applications, and then looking at the data inside of those cloud applications. And then DLP overlays both of those and runs data patterns against the data, whether that's data in motion that is transferring across the inline controls, or whether that's data at rest that is sitting on the sanctioned applications and connecting to those via API. We have the ability to run a very large volume of data patterns or data profiles and help identify that sensitive data with a very high level of accuracy. Let's talk a little bit about the technical capabilities and the architecture and how we accomplish these things. So these use cases, just to reiterate the use cases that we're talking about here. So identifying risky SaaS applications in use and then controlling access. Data security, protecting sensitive data across all of those SaaS applications. And then threat protection. So I'll dive a little deeper into each of those use cases and talk about how we do that from an architecture perspective, which of those modules that I just reviewed are necessary in order to accomplish those goals, and how those architecturally are laid out. So for Shadow IT Control, we're very focused on the SaaS security inline module. That's the primary module that is required in order to accomplish this. We do this on all three of our primary control points, whether that's Prisma Access for remote users, next generation firewall, or VM series firewalls. So that next generation firewall at the headquarters of the data center, or the VM series firewall for the branch or the remote location, or if you've got a VM series firewall for your headquarters location because you're fully virtualized. We support all of those use cases with our next generation CASB solution. We take and we extend application visibility to 44,000 applications. So we have the ability to look at way more than just a few thousand applications, and we can identify and put risk scores on 40,000 plus applications. We also have the ability to do automated discovery of new SaaS applications. So this is something that's very different from other CASBs out there. We've identified what makes a SaaS application a SaaS application, and we have an automated tool called ACE. This is our application categorization engine, and this helps us grow our application catalog so that we can automate the process of identifying new SaaS applications. So if a new cloud application vendor pops up tomorrow, within a couple of weeks, we will have that identified, discovered, and in our SaaS application catalog. We also have the ability to assess risk. And so we use several different metrics for assessing risk. We have some user risk metrics that are based on user risk scoring, but we also have some risk metrics that are based on the application itself. So is the application SOC 2 compliant? Is the application, what is their data ownership policy? Do they support multi-factor authentication? So there's some application-based risk scoring as well. And if you can see in the bottom right there in the dashboard, I know it's a really small picture, but there is a graph of what users are going to high-risk applications. And you can see in your environment, are there users that are using high-risk applications? And then, of course, once you start to think about control, maybe you should be blocking users from using those high-risk applications. Well, the advantage of Palo Alto is we can push that policy back down to the next-generation firewall where we originally got the visibility from. So there's no need to reroute traffic. There's no need to re-architect your environment. We can push that control back down to the original enforcement point where we got the visibility from in the first place. So moving on to data security. Data security, we really think about discovery of sensitive data. So the discovery of sensitive data, we do rely on both modules. We look at inline data that's moving to cloud applications, and we leverage, again, those same control points, Prisma Access for remote users, next generation firewall or VM series for on-premises users or for users that are sitting behind those firewalls. And we're looking at data in motion as it's going to those cloud applications. So that ability to look at data as it's moving across the wire and discover that sensitive data. And the other side of DLP is the API side of DLP. So that is where we have 25 sanctioned applications that we support, and we can connect directly to those applications, and we can see what is inside of those applications. Is there personally identifiable information? Is there credit card numbers? Is there, other information? We'll talk a little bit more about DLP in just a moment about some of our detection methodologies that we support. But the idea there is we have the ability to discover that sensitive data inside of those SaaS applications. We also have something called data exposure detection. So when you're thinking about SaaS applications like Box or like OneDrive within Office 365, it might be okay to put sensitive data inside of those SaaS applications as long as it's not shared externally. So data exposure detection says, let me look at this and see who is it shared with. Is it shared internally? Is it shared externally to my organization? What are the sharing permissions of this? So that extra layer of exposure detection is very valuable for organizations to help. We also have a technology called auto remediation, which helps automate some of the remediation actions that you might want to take if data were to be exposed either inadvertently or intentionally by a user. That's where you can help prevent data exfiltration. We have a couple of unique audit and compliance reports for GDPR type reporting, for other compliance-based reporting that helps you understand what kind of data is sitting inside of your cloud data repositories. It's very helpful for organizations, especially those that do business internationally and have some governance and compliance reporting that needs to be produced. So when we talk about DLP, I want to talk a little bit about detection methodologies. So we have out-of-the-box data patterns and regulation templates, as well as some machine learning detection methodologies to help identify things that are hard to identify with a more traditional data pattern. So things like healthcare documents, which might be prone to false positives if they're using a traditional machine, regular expression-based machine learning or regular expression-based data pattern. We have the ability to identify those as well. Additionally, we have a couple other techniques that are worth mentioning. We have optical character recognition, which is OCR. And we also have exact data matching. So I'll talk a little bit about exact data matching for those who are not familiar with it. Exact data matching is a technology in which you run a index of a structured data set. You then have the ability to upload that index. We upload it in a hashed format, so your data is never living in our cloud unencrypted. And then we can match against that data exactly. This is really useful for things like health records. It's really useful for things like customer records. It's really useful for things like employee records. It's really useful for any kind of table that has a record number where you're traditionally prone to a lot of false positives because numbers are hard to differentiate from each other. Typically with regular expressions or other detection techniques, those numbers are hard to differentiate from each other, even when you're using an algorithm or some other method. Exact data matching doesn't use those described content mechanisms to check. This looks like this number. It says this is this number. And not only is this number, it also contains this number. Let's say the number is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, but it also has the user's name next to that number. So we have a very high accuracy level using exact data matching with our next generation CASB solution. Again, for a reminder, we can do that both inline at the firewall layer, as well as inside of SaaS applications. And we support about 25 sanctioned SaaS applications. The third use case I'll talk about today is threat protection. So looking at threat protection, we have the ability to use our same 3 control points, Prisma Access, Next Generation Firewall, and Virtual Firewall, as well as API, to do a couple of different things for threat protection. Of course, malware and threat prevention is key to threat protection. Identifying both known and unknown malware and finding that using machine learning is critical and important for threat protection. Having an incident remediation workflow and understanding this incident occurred and identifying the incident and the user and indicating that that might be a compromised device as well is a really critical component of threat protection. But I think one of the most important things that we get asked about the most when it comes to threat protection is unmanaged device access control, because it doesn't necessarily assume malware. It assumes an unknown device or an unmanaged device. We talk about unmanaged device access control because users could potentially be logging into SaaS applications from unmanaged devices with the right credentials. Preventing that is part of a CASB solution. So having the ability to restrict who is accessing your Office 365, who is accessing Box, who is accessing these environments from an unmanaged device perspective is a part of preventing threats from impacting your environment. And that is a part of a next generation CASB solution. So why Palo Alto Networks? One of the things that has been the secret to success of Palo Alto Networks is consistent security delivered as a service, consistent best-in-class security delivered as a service. We have the ability to deliver those security services from the cloud, which removes a lot of the management overhead. If you think about 10 years ago, what it took to manage a DLP solution that did all of the things or some of the things that I just described our DLP is capable of doing, how much infrastructure would be required to do data in motion inspection with those data patterns and the ability to do optical character recognition and exact data matching. The amount of infrastructure required to do that on a network for data in motion, you don't have to manage that. So being able to do that provides a lot of return on the investment. So delivering that as a cloud delivered service is a critical component of why organizations choose Palo Alto Networks. Again, the other side of that is we share intelligence across security product categories so that you have the ability to block threats that may have not even impacted your organization. It may have impacted another organization or another part of the world. So that network effect of having a large number of customers turning unknown threats into known threats is a critical component. When it comes to SaaS, that network effect also helps us identify net new SaaS applications faster. It helps us with partnerships from an API perspective as well. So there's a few reasons from a security delivered as a service why organizations choose Palo Alto Networks. Additionally, I mentioned Prisma Access a couple of times. Many organizations are undergoing their SASE journey. So SASE, Secure Access Service Edge. The idea being for those remote branch, home, or mobile users, there needs to be a consistent experience as they traverse the internet and they go to those locations. So CASB is a key component of that SASE solution. So we have integrated that into our SASE solution. So the management interface is integrated. We have integrated that as part of that security as a service layer into our SASE solution. So the user experience and the administrator experience from a Prisma Access perspective and seeing how CASB is tightly tied into SASE from Palo Alto Networks is another reason why organizations are picking Palo Alto Networks for CASB, because they're on that bigger SASE journey, and this is just part of that story. So being able to deliver that consistent end user experience is really important. If you have one organization who is delivering your security experience for the user when they are in the office, and then another security organization delivering security for that user when they're remote, you have an inconsistent end user experience. You have inconsistent block pages when they reach resources that they're not allowed to access, or they may have inconsistent experiences when they try to upload content from the office versus from their home. Users are savvy, and that lack of consistency for the end user experience is going to cause them to question, well, what is the right answer here? So having that consistency and end user experience with security and visibility across the board, regardless of where the user's traffic originates and or the destination of that traffic, is another critical reason why organizations choose Palo Alto Networks. So that's what I had for today. Let me see if there's any questions.